Welcome to Minding the Gap podcast, brought to you by Behavioral Sciences of Alabama. I'm Paul Bakke, licensed counselor. I'm with David Barnhart, Dr. David Barnhart. And we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about the gaps created by the stress that we all live with, and how our minds can come up with some strategies to deal with that stress. Good morning, Dr. Barnhart. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you doing on this nice COVID?
Well, I'm a little stressed, to be honest with you. I'm a little stressed because my computer would not work to get this thing going. As you know, we talked about it shut down, and that's one of the things that this pandemic has done, is it's created this need to have this technology work exactly right all the time, and it just doesn't. So it interrupts meetings. It just interrupts the flow of conversation and doing things.
Yes.
And so that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about this morning, is the stress that we're all dealing with in the pandemic. And you can show your title.
Oh, you want to take a look at this thing?
Of your talk that you had last night. If you'd like to right now.
All right. Yeah, this was kind of fun. Let's see. We have to hit all the right buttons, like screen sharing. And then hope that it works. And it usually does. But when it doesn't,
there's a gap.
It's a gap. There's a gap in communication, like just then, for example. I don't know, did that come up? So I always have to ask, can you see this?
See it.
All right.
I see it. Peace of mind during the stress pandemic.
Yeah, so I was talking to a group of people last night, actually, on this topic. And I thought this is, we have a stress pandemic. We definitely have a stress pandemic. So, and we all typically are striving for peace. Equanimity, even. I was talking to somebody earlier today about equanimity. You want to be able to remain calm in a challenging situation. It's part of emotional regulation, which is part of what's called emotional intelligence or social intelligence. Kind of goes by both names. And the idea was, well, can we inoculate? This is a word that's been around in psychology probably since the 70s. There was a psychologist by the name of Meichenbaum, Donald Meichenbaum. And he wrote a book actually called Stress Inoculation. I was quite interested in that book. And we don't often use this terminology with stress. We'll talk about stress management, but what we really do is more than manage. We're looking for inoculation. How can I prepare myself in order to be able to cope with this challenging situation that's coming up? For example, if I don't know, if you have to go unfortunately to a deposition, you want to be able to go and have some equanimity. So being calm, even in a stressful situation. For people who are competitive athletically, they want to be able to prepare themselves for whatever the event they're facing. And what occurred to me, I happened to see this. I was looking for some photos that might be illustrative of meditation, and I found this. I thought this was kind of cute, and I use this phrase when I'm talking to people about being their usual charming self, because we typically think of ourselves as being pretty cool. And the question is, under these circumstances, with all, we don't have access to the things that are our usual outlets, our friends. Sometimes we're isolated from family. We have a colleague right now that's not going to be able to come into the office for a meeting that we're going to have because she was out of state, and she didn't want to bring, and she's fine, but she didn't want to bring something in, just really thinking about everybody else's comfort. And so that it interferes in things that we didn't have to think about before. It wasn't something that occurred. So like a trip out of state would disrupt your ability to get with your peer group. And I miss my colleagues. I get to see you, and I see the rest of our group on our Zoom meetings, and when we're getting together to talk about helping people in different cases and so forth. But it's not the same as being in the room together. So
it's very isolating. I really felt that yesterday. For just during the beginning, my kids were home. They're out of school because everything shut down, and so they had people around. So it was kind of, didn't really feel the effects of it that much. But my wife's at work. I'm home. Of course, the dog's here. And, we have a puppy, so I have to watch after him. But that's another stressor that just happened to me right then. I'm in the backyard because that's the best place for my dog to be and being able to watch my puppy without him getting in my lap and going crazy. Well, he was barking at the neighbors down the street. So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be so unprofessional. If you hear barking dog in the background, and this is going to mess up the podcast. And so there's this, we're just dealing with something that's so different. That's just really kind of every moment.
Yes. And I got this question last night, and it's a question that we often get is, well, how do I deal with the ambiguity? And when you and I are talking to somebody about ambiguity of situations, we automatically kind of translate that into uncertainty. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know what it is I'm going to be adjusting to. And so that was a very good and timely question, because part of what we do today is we talk about the use of tools to be able to deal with ambiguity or uncertainty in situations. And while we're on that topic, and I've got this this pretty cool photo up, you see what we would anticipate. This may be a mom and her daughter, and they're sitting there doing meditation. It's interesting that we often look at that pose and it automatically means meditation. They're not trying to catch water in each hand dripping from the ceiling. That's not what's going on. But meditation doesn't even have to look that way. It can have a variety of looks. So we can even do things like walk and meditate at the same time, and maybe we'll look at that. But adjusting to ambiguity, and we can actually use meditation as a strategy to, in effect, provide some exposure to the ambiguity. And maybe we can talk about some of that as we go along. I'm not sure we'll be able to get into it in today's session, but maybe we can. What I thought, part of what we want to do is talk about coping with things that parents or grandparents are dealing with. So you may have a grandchild, or you may have a child I mean, I've been talking to grandparents that are taking over the, monitoring the virtual school situation. So kids are coming in for a Zoom meeting to do their math class or their English class, or anyhow, they have these Zoom meetings set up. And, sometimes it's just not smooth, like you're saying. So they might not be able to connect. Or I've talked to a number of kids lately that just hate the virtual classroom, and it's aversive to them. So maybe it would be useful to look at that a little bit. I had this kind of illustration because I think it helps us to think about the kind of this constraint that we all have when we get triggered. And this is an illustration of what happens in the brain. Obviously, this is not a picture of a brain, but and it's kind of a simplified version. It gets a little bit more complex in this, but it pretty well illustrates kind of a fundamental problem that we have with ourselves, with each other, with our kids, if you're parenting. And that is when we get triggered by a stress, this information comes in maybe through the eyes or the ears or whatever. And there's a part of the brain located in this area called the sensory thalamus. So if it comes in through the eyes, and it's a threat, a perceived threat, like Zoom meeting starting up and my kid's not present. Okay. So there's a trigger, and we call this the low road. This is really fast. And some of our neural pathways are extremely rapid. But generally speaking, we could think of this as maybe 30 milliseconds. So we get triggered, and then there's this threat detection part of the brain, and the part of the brain called the amygdala, and actually two of these one on each hemisphere. And the amygdala is famous for the fight or flight response. So we'll have some emotional or feeling response that might come from the threat detection. Technically, some neuroscientists say that this is we don't really feel fear at this point. It's what happens in our conscious awareness that kind of translates the body response into fear. But it's also fast to us. It's just like, oh, this is a fear response or our anxiety response. So it's 50 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds. Okay. So I call up to Billy Bob and I say, hey, Billy Bob, your Zoom meeting is going to start, in about 10 minutes. So you need to be down here. I let you know 20 minutes ago to get ready. So 10 minutes, it's going to be starting. And, of course, Billy Bob, hears that. And Billy Bob has this visceral response. I hate, he's voiced this, he's thought this, right? So the thinking part is up here, right? So we get this history that gets recorded in parts of our brain. In some areas, it's stored in long-term memory. It's episodic memory. So we've got this. I've had this association with going to a Zoom meeting class, and I hate going to that, and I don't understand what's going on.
And it may be also coupled with, I hate it when my dad nags me and reminds me 10 minutes before everything.
Yes. Yeah. So what happens is not everybody's real excited about what we have to say. they're not having a good time with it. So they might be more like this. Oh no, I don't have to go to Zoom. Anyway, sorry, that just happened to happen. It reminded me of those. So we get this this response, and then we think about, okay, the kid doesn't show up, and now, we're dealing with, now what? How do I approach this? So we think about the parents first, because when you're a parent, you're responsible. So you are responsible for managing your own emotional response so that you don't make this worse. And sometimes we don't stop and think, well, how can I help this kid adjust to this situation?
Just wanted to comply.
Yeah, just comply. Just
and you're worried about, if he doesn't comply, it's going to be bad, and I've got to do something to make it happen.
Yes, quickly. So
quickly.
We don't,
even if I can't, even if I really have no control of it.
And it's unfortunate. The reality is the kid's brain doesn't have a sponge in it, so that the verbal things that we're saying to them get absorbed until finally it's just saturated, and the kid goes, "Oh, huh, I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier. If I go ahead and get down there on time, you're not going to be upset with me, and I won't feel as upset, and I won't get behind in my schoolwork. And, someday I'll be able to have a good grade and maybe get college admission and have a good job at some point." I don't know why that didn't occur to me, but I'm glad it finally did. I'm glad you kept repeating yourself 500 times, because, it got there eventually. So, okay, so this is all normal. There's nothing there's no character flaw in any of this. This is just the nature of stress, what happens to us. And so I put this a little, we have people do stress logs, and there are a lot of reasons for keeping a stress log. Well, what's the trigger? How did I feel? And what were the thoughts about that trigger? Now, part of what you and I are trying to do with people is develop self-awareness. And you could say, well, I'm always aware of my stress, but the issue is more than that. Self-awareness is to know why we feel the way we do and under what circumstances. So there's more to it than just, yeah, it's stressful when he doesn't show up. Well, what we really are trying to do is use our minds to train our brain to go down a different pathway. And so by keeping track of the stresses, it's like getting on the scales and weighing. You're giving yourself feedback, even at a non-conscious level, what preceded the trigger. And when we do that kind of thing, we get better at anticipating the triggers. We get better at intervening with a different way of thinking or a different way of behaving so that we can get to a different outcome. Now, I don't know, I picked Billy Bob. I mean, we live in the South, and so, we have a lot of double names. Although, there may be somebody out there named Billy Bob, I'm sorry. But you're going to be a good model, and you probably don't do this. But so Billy Bob is 10, and he isn't ready to start his English class for his Zoom meeting. And so the parent feels frustrated, irritated, And in their head, and this is probably true, I told him 30 minutes ago he should be ready. He was probably playing video games, right? How many times have we heard that? And then we think about this level of discomfort, and SUD represents a scale of 1 to 10 subjective units of discomfort. We want to capture those things that are moderately, say at least a 4 or above on our stress log. And so this is a therapy strategy that can lead to thinking about how we want to think. And, you know, we'll just do this quick Gofar. We call this a Gofar analysis. And it's a pretty cool acronym because we get a bunch of acronyms in Huntsville. So, well, we also like acronyms. Paul's really good. You're really good at creating acronyms, and we got to share some of those because they're useful tools. So we have a Gofar analysis, and we go back to this, you know, this thought process that we were looking at. I told him 30 minutes ago he should be ready. Now, should is an interesting word. Because it implies that things should be different. And actually, in reality, if we go down to the reality part, is my thinking in line with objective reality? The R is for reality. We say, well, if they should be different, then they would be different, in fact. But we haven't done the steps that make it likely that it would occur. So in fact, he shouldn't be here on time. And why would I expect him to? Because I haven't trained him to do that. I don't know. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So let's, can you take me through my step? Okay. So I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I want this podcast and video to go well. And I don't want anything to interfere with that. And my dog goes to the fence and sees someone walking down the streets and starts barking.
Right.
So I hit the mute button, and as I'm muted, I'm thinking, I'm feeling anxious, and I'd say it got to about a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, when am I going to talk? You know, when I talk, I'm going to have to unmute myself. You know, what do I do if the dog's barking? Do I yell at him? No, that's not a good idea, because then that would be more unprofessional. Do I, you know, and then so I'm starting to worry and think about, you know, what if this bad thing happens, and I'm sort of catastrophizing it in my mind,
mm-hmm.
going to this bad thing, and I've got to do something to prevent this problem from happening. Luckily, he stopped and went back to the furniture and sat down. But that's an example of thinking normal. You know, I don't want this to go badly. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I want this to go well. And how can I change my thinking to reflect the Gofar analysis?
Mm-hmm.
Is my thought about him ruining the podcast, does that help me reach my goal?
Mm-hmm.
No, that doesn't. And one of the things that we talk about is that if any one of those is a no, then it's an unhelpful thought.
Mm-hmm.
I can't control him. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I could unclick my camera and go put him up or something like that. But for me, the reality is I'm having to watch my dog. This is the best place for him. I can't control him. I can maybe change the circumstances. But what if he is barking?
Mm-hmm.
What if I do have to mute him? Is that the worst thing in the world?
Right.
Is that going to be, you know, and that's what we talked about before. You know, we want certainty. We want people to enjoy the podcast. We want people to, we want this outcome to happen, and we're trying with our worries and our thoughts, we're trying to make it the bad thing not happen and the good thing happen. And the reality for this situation is a lot of it's out of my control. And so acceptance is one of the things, and I know you talk about a lot, that's yes. key to all of this, is accepting that, I can't control that. Here's what I can do. And in the end, is it really that big of a deal if this bad thing continues to happen? In fact, can it be kind of funny?
Absolutely. Yeah,
can it be kind of entertaining? This bad thing is happening to this therapist where he's trying to do this podcast. He's trying to be all in control, and how ironic and funny is that? Well, maybe he's just like the rest of us who struggle with stuff, and we don't yes. have to have it all under control all the time. That's so right. As you were talking about that, I was going through that process of what are my thoughts, and they're natural. You can't stop them from happening, but you can recognize them. You can use the Gofar analysis to say, okay, yes, this is a better way to think about this. If I think about it in this other way, that I feel like I'm in control, and I'm accepting of the outcome and accepting of the uncertainty of it.
Yes, yes.
But then taking it a step further, like you were saying with the stress log, what is a consistent trigger for me? If it's my son not coming down for the Zoom meeting, if it's me not be able to even get the thing going for my computer working, is being able to think about that beforehand and accept that, this might not work because I can't make this computer work. I can't, make my son behave in a certain way. I can even expect him to be hesitant to follow my direction. That's normal for a kid to do that. I can kind of accept that these things are going to happen, instead of I've got to make this thing stop, which is the natural thing that we all do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think maybe in future podcasts, we might go a little further with this. It would be, or maybe another circumstance, and maybe even get into the communication side. How do you talk to a kid? How do you set it up so that they're more likely to be successful? But as a parent, the first way that we begin to handle things is really internally. How is it I need to think, and how do I need to behave in order to bring about a different outcome? I need to set myself up so that I'm more likely to be successful with, in this case, helping Billy Bob get to his Zoom meeting on time.
Yep. All right. Well, good deal. Good job, Dr. Barnhart. We hopefully made it through this without any disasters happening, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Well, so we'll sign off for today. We'll sign off for today, and we'll see everybody next time.
All right. Take care.